Hi, I'm Patrick Deuley. I am the soon-to-be former Senior Product Manager for GitLab's ecosystem team. Before I leave, I just wanted to share a few thoughts. Think of this like a few different pieces. One, a kickoff video for, let's say, 14.1 to 14.8, I don't know. The future opportunities that are in the near term, our nearsighted roadmap for where ecosystem is going to head, what we'll be working on soon. And then I want to talk for a little bit about where I think the future can head. What's exciting about ecosystem, what's exciting about GitLab, and where ecosystem can have a huge impact on the company over the next decade. I came to GitLab because of some of these really awesome far future things, and I want to make sure that some of these thoughts are shared before I go. But first, let's talk about what's in front of us. So we've been working for a while on different Atlassian-related functionality, specifically around Jira lately. And we added the Jira issue list, we added Jira issue details, but so far that's read-only. So we're currently working on a couple of different pieces. One is supporting more editing and interactive functionality inside of issue details. So that is commenting, changing the status, updating labels, editing the description. All of those pieces are really critical. The other chunk of it is on the issue list itself. We need to see more filtering, searching, more abilities, much like our own issue lists, getting closer to parity with those two pieces. And then there's also some support for self-hosted that needs to get built out. We need to make sure that the vast majority of users are able to consume this integration. And the story is the same that it's always been. We need to get to a point where, for a developer who's working in an organization that does project management through Jira, they're able to stay in GitLab over 80% of the time. So when they're doing their normal day-to-day work, when they're writing code, collaborating with their teammates, they can simply stay inside of GitLab. That ability will only happen if we have enough tools that they don't have to go back to Jira to go comment on an issue or to go find a specific issue that is relevant to the thing they're doing. All of those abilities that you rely on day to day as a developer inside of GitLab, we need enough of that so that they can relegate their Jira usage simply to sprint planning rituals, right? When they do their retrospectives, when they sit down for milestone planning, when they look at these broader scope things that may have reach outside of their project. Otherwise, they can rely purely on GitLab for their needs. Up next, I think y'all should work on Slack for a couple of reasons. One, Slack has introduced a ton of new functionality since we released our own Slack application. Two, because our Slack application only supports a minor subset of users. And three, because it's important to our company. It's a great opportunity for dogfooding. So let's talk a little bit about what's changed. So we released our Slack application, which in the docs and inside the application we refer to as the chat ops or the Slack / commands. It supports chat ops functionality. It was built by our team, we launched it, but that's not actually what most people are using. The Slack application represents a small percentage of the overall usage of Slack. For the most part, it's just people using the Slack notifications. Slack notifications are done through a generic webhook receiver, and that's kind of a failure of imagination here. We have a Slack application, we need to get the two things together. So in the last year and a half or so, Slack has added a ton of new functionality inside their application APIs. So there's a new authentication service. It's the OAuth 2 v2 interface. This allows you to do some really cool stuff that's been commonly requested. So we have a couple of open issues around displaying private repos or confidential issues inside of Slack, unfurling those links. But unfortunately, we can't do that today because of the way it's working. If we go and support the OAuth 2 v2 interface, we can add credential management for individual GitLab profiles and then allow the application, the integration, the Slack application, to use those GitLab credentials to unfurl those links, which will allow them to display private text while still respecting our policies around who has visibility into what specific issue or repo. Additionally, there are a lot of requests out there for the ability to see more granular notifications. So restricting or adding or modifying what notifications they're getting, adding support for more types of events, changing what types of content is available through those events. And this is going to be a tricky thing to work on because we need to thread the needle between offering enough configurability to make it exciting and interesting and useful for users, but keeping it simple enough that it works for most people out of the box. We've already done some of this work. A few months ago, Libor worked on a project where we were evaluating what text was in the notification, trying to thread the needle between a number of different requests. And we were able to come up with something that kind of met all the requirements mostly and made everybody pretty happy. We're going to need to do the same thing with event notification types and the content that's available inside of those. The other piece that's really interesting and worthwhile to look at, although I don't know if this is something we really want to dive deep into, but available in some of their new APIs are events that you can pass to the Slack Workflow Builder. Slack Workflow Builder allows you to pass events in or pass resources in, API resources in, so that Slack can make calls out. And it allows you to do a couple different things. So let's just illustrate what's possible with Workflow Builder. So in Workflow Builder, if we had everything configured and we were passing all the data appropriately, we could do things like allow, when a pipeline failure comes through, allow a user to add a button to that notification that allows you to retry the pipeline, or create a new issue with the payload from that pipeline failure. Now, this is functionality that's sometimes available inside of GitLab, the GitLab UI itself, but if we add it to Slack, that reduces one click. That's one fewer thing they have to go to GitLab to do. When they get the notification about the failed pipeline, they could click it and immediately retry it. There are a ton of different options here. You could also say, create workflows inside of a Slack channel where I say, I want to be able to do this new action where I create an issue inside of GitLab, I assign it to a specific person or group of people, I make this comment on it, and then I notify another channel. Right? Like those complex workflows are able to be created by the users in their own custom ways through Slack Workflow Builder. What we need to do is give our Slack application the appropriate API endpoints that it knows how to work with them and register them inside of the Workflow Builder APIs. And then we also need to add some additional data to the webhook payloads we're sending so that Slack can understand how to interact with them and how they can interface with Workflow Builder. So I think there's a huge opportunity here in that we should be building the things that would make our lives easier at GitLab. We should be working on tools that more and more of our teams can consume and the things that our own team wants to see most. So I think there are some interesting things to investigate. There's some low-hanging fruit as far as like unfurling private information. I think there's some great stuff that we could be doing around notifications that would be really valuable. And then I think we should investigate the Workflow Builder stuff. There's a ton of opportunity. We need to dig in to see how much of a technical lift it is, but I think there's definitely something worth looking at there. The next thing I would be looking at is ServiceNow. So ServiceNow is an interesting one. And if you want to dive deep on ServiceNow, there's a ServiceNow epic that you can go take a look at. I added a about 15-minute long explainer at the top of it. It's got a YouTube link in there that talks about what ServiceNow is, what the opportunity is, what we should be working on. So that's there. I'm going to kind of keep it briefer here. But the short version of it is ServiceNow is really important to very large organizations. The easiest way to tell this story and to kind of help you understand what that is, for a bank who has a very large organization behind it, they have really mission critical code. Everything inside a bank is pretty mission critical, right? Like there is some piece of code running in that bank that is moving money around. And if you were to make a change to that code and did it in the wrong way, money could disappear, right? Like we can't let that happen. And simple change review is not enough for things like this. They may have legal requirements, regulatory requirements that are specifically tied around how a specific piece of code works and how it's functioning, what data is being exposed how, that it's following certain protocols. And so in these really complex, highly regulated environments, what we end up seeing most organizations do is use something like ServiceNow for change management. What that means is when I write this code, yes, it goes to code review inside of GitLab. And then once that's been approved, that organization wants to do something like send it to the legal team for review. When they approve it, send it to the operations team for review. And then when that's approved, then send it to some architecture committee team for approval. And then when all of those have been passed, then kick off the pipeline for deployment. That's a really common use case around ServiceNow. The other one is if you've ever worked in a large company that had an IT help desk, those same sort of help desk workflows are really common. So imagine my laptop's broken, so I need a new laptop. So it gets assigned to the help desk. Help desk says yes, definitely needs a new laptop. It gets reassigned to procurement. Procurement orders the laptop. It waits. When the laptop comes in, it gets reassigned to the help desk to come pick it up from procurement, right? Like those stepped workflows between different departments. That's what ServiceNow is really about. That's where they shine the most and why they're so widely adopted in large enterprises. So our opportunity is supporting those two workflows. I think that the change management workflow would be huge. ServiceNow in Q3 of 2020 released some updates to their DevOps plugin that's available in their marketplace. This update integrated with GitLab. So the way it works, if you want to use the DevOps integration, is on a given project, you set the deployment step to manual. You go into ServiceNow and turn on the DevOps plugin, and then you connect a webhook from GitLab into ServiceNow. What that does is it will monitor the pipeline actions, the pipeline events coming in through the webhook payloads. And when it sees a new pipeline come in, it will trigger a workflow, right? In ServiceNow, that's their whole bread and butter. So ServiceNow, you can create the workflow however you want to create it. But at the end of the workflow, you can create a deployment step that then comes back into GitLab using our APIs and re-triggers that deployment step, or triggers the deployment step for the first time as a manual job. That's great, but if you're familiar with how our CI system works, there are some workarounds. There are some ways you can circumvent this process, which is not what you want, right? Like you want this to be a lockdown process that no one can affect outside of the normal means. And so what we need to do is build an integration inside of GitLab, just like we've done with so many others, that allows us to have tight controls around what can be done inside of ServiceNow. So when a project is under change management by ServiceNow, deployment cannot happen without the right approvals through ServiceNow. Additionally, we should look at integrating this at the group level and the instance level so that to make it easy for admins to enforce those across large suites of projects. I think this is a great opportunity for some ultimate functionality. It would be one of the first pieces of ultimate functionality we've ever done as an integration. So I think that's really cool. And the kinds of customers that are using ServiceNow, I think they already really great targets for ultimate in any case. So this is kind of a good fit, right? The same reasons that they're evaluating us for some of our excellent security tools, they're going to love to see an excellent ServiceNow integration that allows them to tightly combine their compliance needs and their security needs. I think that is a huge opportunity. The other piece of it, as far as more generic workflow management, I think is probably mostly solved by what ServiceNow has already produced. So the plugin that they updated in Q3 of 2020 also is powered by a thing called a GitLab spoke. So their whole plugin system is built on top of this system called spokes. And spokes are all of the endpoints and all of the events, kind of like we were talking about earlier with Workflow Builder, where they've registered this action calls this API, these are the pieces of data in the payload. So the spoke system allows you to do things like inside of a ServiceNow workflow, I can call a step where I go and create an issue, and then I wait for that issue to get closed or merged or what have you, right? So those pieces are available today through the spokes system. And I think the generic IT help desk workflow is probably well served by them today. It's worth investigating. It's definitely something that we can dig into further. But the change management journey is a really key piece that I think we can definitely sell in Ultimate. We can do some really exciting things with it. And I think some of our biggest customers are going to be really happy to see it. So beyond that, I think there's a ton. There are over 30 or over 40 net new integration requests out there. I think Rally is super cool. It is not the most popular project management system. It's a really popular project management system in a specific niche. It's really cool. It is highly opinionated. It reminds me of Aha, but in a slightly different way, in that it kind of strikes the balance between something like Jira and Aha, in that it's highly focused on user stories. It has some really interesting opinionation about how it thinks of describing work that needs to get done. I think there is a ton of opportunity for integration with it. It's going to look a lot like our Jira integration. I think we could kind of copy and paste that same sort of experience into Rally, although there's quite a bit of change that would have to get done. But I think something similar for Rally would be awesome. There are a handful of customers who are really excited, really interested, have been very vocal about wanting that integration. So that would be one to check out. Microsoft Teams is really interesting. Microsoft Teams, if you haven't been paying attention over the last couple of years, has grown dramatically. It started as, and I may be remiss on this, I may be wrong. It seemed like it started as just kind of a chat platform and has grown into a massive suite of productivity tools that are all part of Office 365, or not part of, but well integrated with Office 365. It's more than just chat. There are a ton of different collaboration tools in there, which means there is a ton of surface area for where GitLab could integrate. I think we should check out Microsoft Teams. I don't know what it looks like. There's already a ton of work that we've already talked about. But I think a future state, there's a huge opportunity there. I'm sure Microsoft would love to work closely with us on that. I think there's a great future world in which Microsoft Teams and GitLab can become really tightly knit together, and it could be a really cool experience. And beyond that, sky's the limit. There are so many integrations. What's important to remember is things that GitLab won't do. Like build a chat application, right? Like Slack is one of our most popular applications to integrate with, and the reason is we're not going to go build chat. And so as long as there are popular things out there that GitLab's not going to do, integrating with those things makes people's lives easier. As I've talked to customers over the years and integration partners and alliance partners, one of the things I say a lot is there is this thesis at GitLab that a single tool for the entire DevOps lifecycle is the best possible experience. So conversely, if you have a bunch of disparate tools that don't talk to each other, that is the worst possible experience. Integrations allow us to bridge that gap and help people use different tools that they may have very specific reasons they're using, and they can use those tools together. And while they may not be fully one application, just like the GitLab dream, at least they're knitted well together. They're sitting next to each other. They talk to each other. That's a better experience. So outside of integrations, which I've just spent 17 minutes talking about, the other piece that is going to be critical over the next few years is expanding our support for our APIs. Our REST API is better than our GraphQL API. We're working on the GraphQL API, and both of them are very okay. As we reach larger and larger customers, we need to start spending more time on ensuring that our APIs allow access to all of the data that we're storing. A common theme, if you look back at, I think it was our 2019 January CAB meeting, in the verbatims there was a discussion there around how our VSM tools were pretty cool. But at the end of the day, the company that was discussing this said they had spent tens of millions of dollars on this centralized VSM platform for their entire company, who had a couple 100,000 employees. And they said, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good your VSM tools are, I need to pull that data in so I can view it as part of that unified data set. I think this is true in large organizations in a lot of different places. And we've seen that in integrations, right? Like, I want to use Confluence as my wiki. I like that your wiki exists. I don't want to use it. I want to make Confluence the source of truth for my organization. And so what we've done is we've allowed Confluence to be in the sidebar so that it can replace wiki. Now, the same is going to be true from a data standpoint if you look at the APIs. Our APIs for large organizations give them access to write glue code or pull data out into data lakes that they have for analysis for their data teams. These pieces of functionality cannot be replaced by native GitLab functionality. They have to be supported through our APIs. So our REST APIs are critical because that is the most common way that they're going to pull this data out into those kinds of systems. GraphQL is great, especially for writing glue code, because they can build really great interfaces very rapidly in very flexible ways. That's really, really valuable. GraphQL support also increases the velocity at which we can move. Our front-end teams, if we had better GraphQL support, our front-end teams could move faster and build more things in more modern ways. So that's really important. Our GDK could use some work. We only have one person supporting it today, so I'm trying. I don't want to bash on Ash. Ash, you're doing a great job, but we need more people working on it. This is a critical part of our organization. Everyone uses the GDK for the most part. Maybe not legal or marketing, right? But everyone else does. I have installed the GDK many times over. Designers are using the GDK to evaluate their designs to ensure that they're being built appropriately. All of our engineers are using it. Many of our other functions are using the GDK on a regular basis to test out and examine different pieces. This is a really critical part of how we operate in our internal toolings, in our internal tool chain. So we should be working more on that, making it easier to maintain. We've added Git pod support, which has been awesome. We have gotten hugely positive reviews for that. But continuing to go down that path of making it easier and easier to support your own local installation, to maintain it, to keep it updated, to make it easier to check out different branches. Those pieces would go a huge way on making quality of life better inside of GitLab in our engineering organization and even further beyond that. Finally, foundations. Foundations, I'm hoping we'll see grow soon, fingers crossed. Foundations is so critical in much the same way that GDK is in creating a more accessible, more cohesive GitLab experience. We have made some awesome progress on rolling pajamas out further, getting more components getting components retired, getting components moved to their more modern equivalents. That's awesome. We need to keep going. We need more and more teams to be involved. We need more teams to commit to migrating components over. We need continued support from the design organization to ensure that more components are getting defined, designed, built, and rolled out. That is awesome, the work that we've done so far. We need to keep going. So those are the different groups inside of ecosystem. That's what we're going to be working on going forward here. So let's take a little bit to talk about what could the future look like. My one thing I want to leave with you, kind of my parting thought here. The reason I joined GitLab originally, and there were a handful of reasons. I had some amazing coworkers that came over here, including my wife, Christy. I had worked closely with Christopher Levelholtz and Kenny Johnston before. I had worked with a ton of people who had worked with Eric Brinkman, and so there were a ton of good recommendations. But the thing that sold me was our big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's, I'm going to misquote it because I don't have it in front of me, but it's to become the tool of choice for all creative work. That really captured my imagination. And there was this reference to a company called PenFlip in the direction pages back when I joined. And that was, this story about PenFlip was, I think, one of the things that really lit a fire under me and made me want to come to GitLab. So PenFlip was, I believe they're defunct now. Sorry if they're not and you see this PenFlip crew, my bad. But PenFlip was a screenwriting tool or a collaborative screenwriting tool. So for people writing scripts for a movie, this is something that you could invite other writers in, work on a script together. You could, make suggestions. You could take notes on things. You could save it. It was all versioned, and it was all completely built on top of the GitLab APIs, which is wild. In the future, as GitLab becomes more of a platform, what this team is doing, what ecosystem is doing, is supporting that big, hairy, audacious goal more than anybody else inside the company. Because what we're doing is building the platform. We are building the tools, which, if you think of it like a palette, these are the palettes and the paintbrushes that other organizations can use to create new experiences that we've never imagined before, that we are not going to prioritize, we are not going to create. We were never going to build a collaborative tool for screenwriters. But when you start to build tools like this, what we're doing is we're making Git more accessible to a wider audience. And that's really exciting. Now, play with me here. This is my crazy future dream. What I would love to see most for GitLab is a world in which we reach out to a company like Autodesk. Autodesk creates AutoCAD, which is one of the most common tools used for architectural diagrams. For architects, creating buildings. which doesn't sound anything like software development. But here's the problem today. An AutoCAD save file is a really big monolithic binary, and that doesn't play well with Git. What we need is something more molecular with Git, right? I need to be able to reference specific lines of plain text, maybe not plain text, right? But specific lines of code that I can then say this piece of code changed, not these few bits changed. That's not helpful data. It's all noise. But if we created a partnership with Autodesk and helped them define a better save file that was more molecular, think the difference between like a JPEG and an SVG, right? You can reach inside that SVG and change values. If I could reach inside an AutoCAD save file and change values, imagine the possibilities. I could open up an architectural diagram of a building. I'm not an architect, so I'm gonna get all this wrong. It's gonna sound stupid to an actual architect, but I could open up a building, right? And I could see a column that I say, this column is load bearing, but it's not big enough for the task at hand. So who put this in here? And I right click on it, I see that it was Jack from a few weeks ago, and I can see the commit message where he said, hey, putting in new columns in the first floor, gonna need to rework later. And I can ping Jack and go, hey, I noticed the columns, when are you gonna rework that, right? This sorts of discussion, the collaboration with context, is something that software has taken for table stakes for years. But nobody else gets to do that in the same way that we do, unless what, are you gonna put sticky notes all over all of the diagrams everywhere and then make sure everybody's sticky notes are in sync? The software industry is the only industry I'm aware of, at least, that is able to keep completely automated change logs for everything they do. And if we can bring that functionality everywhere, there's a huge opportunity. If we can make Git for screenwriters, what about Git for lawyers? Git for architects? Git for music producers? All of these fields could benefit from some of the things that we've created, but we need to do a few things. One, we have to build out a bigger platform that allows these different tools to integrate. We need to reach out into the broader software community and create relationships with these companies. We also need to start reducing the amount of jargon inside our own application. God love our legal team. They use Git. I don't know why. It's crazy that they're able to parse this. The jargon of software development does not map clearly to everything else. What's a repository, right? What's a commit? Merging kind of makes sense, right? But there are these pieces of jargon that if we could find ways to normalize it with plain English, more people could access it, more people could use it. Not only would more people be able to use Git for software development, but they could start to consume Git for other professions as well. And that's really exciting. Again, we can become the tool of choice for all creative work. There is work to do. There's a lot of both development work and community outreach work and other kinds of engagement that needs to happen to get there. But I believe really strongly that over the next 10 years, I think that we can get there. That's why I came to GitLab. I'm going to be a part of the community of contributors. You betcha I'm going to be commenting on your issues and seeing what's going on and keeping up with where GitLab's headed. Because I have been loving Git for, 12 years now? I'm not going to stop using Git tomorrow, and I'm certainly not going to stop using GitLab. I already moved everything over from GitHub. I'm not moving back. I love GitLab. I will be a part of the community. I can't wait to see where y'all take it. I'm so excited for the future, and best of luck. I'll see y'all around.